March 30th, 2025. On the Fox News channel this morning, Director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hegseth, said, President Trump has a long-run vision of a golden age of America, and we're working really, really hard to get it out there in time. But I can't give you any forward-looking guidance on what's going to happen this week. The president has got a heck of a lot of analysis before him, and he's going to make the right choice, I'm sure. The National Economic Council is the primary group the president uses to develop domestic and international economic policy. So the fact that Hegseth appears to have no idea what's coming is concerning. Trump has declared April 2nd Liberation Day because he will announce big new tariffs, posting on his social media site on March 21st. For decades, we have been ripped off and abused by every nation in the world, both friend and foe. Now it is finally time for the good old USA to get some of that money and respect back. God bless America. Other Trump regime officials appear similarly uninformed about Trump's plans. When Fox News Channel personality Shannon Bream asked Peter Navarro, Trump's senior counselor for trade and manufacturing, what to say to consumers who worry that tariffs are going to raise prices, he answered, trust in Trump. He then claimed that tariffs are tax cuts, which makes sense only if he means that tariffs, which raise prices on consumers, might provide enough revenue for the government to enable Republicans to justify tax cuts on the wealthy and corporations. Trump campaigned on the promise to immediately bring prices down, starting on day one. But his tariffs have already helped push inflation upward. Josh Dawsey and Ryan Felton of the Wall Street Journal reported on Thursday that Trump warned the chief executive officers of some of the country's top automakers not to raise prices because of the 25% tariffs he has just put on cars and car parts, telling them that the tariffs are good for them. On Saturday, Trump denied he had made such a request and told NBC News' Kristen Welker that I couldn't care less if they raise prices because people are going to start buying American cars. I couldn't care less, he repeated. I hope they raise their prices because if they do, people are going to buy American-made cars. We have plenty. A White House aide told NBC News that the president was referring to foreign car prices. And then there is Friday's story that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has been taking not only his brother, but also his wife along with him to meetings with foreign military counterparts where sensitive information was discussed. Catherine Long, Max Colchester, Daniel Michaels, and Lindsay Wise of the Wall Street Journal note that her inclusion in such meetings is unusual. Jennifer Hegseth also accompanied Hegseth to his private meetings with senators during the process of his Senate confirmation, making it awkward to ask questions about allegations related to infidelity and sexual misconduct. Both Trump and Hegseth have made it their goal to purge the United States of what they call Marxism and what Hegseth calls woke shit. That is, the racial, gender, and religious diversity that Americans have embraced since World War II. That means taking the government the country has built over the past 80 years down to the ground and rebuilding it as they imagine it was before, with men like them in charge. The Trump regime is the result of at least 45 years of Republican rhetoric that undermined the idea of a government that worked for the good of everyone by claiming that such a government was socialism or Marxism. That argument had nothing to do with actual Marxism, which called for the people to take over farms and factories, and everything to do with America's peculiar history. During the Civil War of the 1860s, the Republicans in Congress both ended human enslavement in the U.S., except as punishment for crime, and invented the nation's first system of national taxation, including the income tax. After the war, racist former Confederates in the South refused to accept the idea that Black Americans were equal to their white neighbors and tried to force formerly enslaved people into subservience. To stop that from happening, Americans in 1868 added the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, putting the weight of the federal government behind equal rights. In 1870, Americans added to the Constitution the 15th Amendment, guaranteeing the right of black men to vote. Also in 1870, Congress established the Department of Justice to prosecute those in the South who continued to persecute their black neighbors on the grounds of race. In response, former Confederates in 1871 began to maintain, falsely, that they had never objected to black rights on racial grounds. What they opposed, they said, was that poor black men, impoverished because of their time in slavery, had the right to vote. Those men would, they said, vote for services like roads and schools and hospitals, and such services could be paid for only through tax levies on propertied Americans, who overwhelmingly were white men. Thus, permitting black men to vote meant socialism that would destroy the United States. To restore true American values, former Confederates and their Northern counterparts insisted, black Americans must be shut out of a voice in government. That rhetoric resurfaced after World War II. In that era, the vast majority of Americans embraced a government that worked for everyone by regulating business, providing a basic social safety net, promoting infrastructure, and protecting civil rights. But those Republicans, eager to avoid regulation and taxation, reached back to Reconstruction to insist that a government that worked in the interest of all Americans was redistributing wealth from hardworking Americans to undeserving minorities and women. Restoring true American values, they said, meant making sure that Marxists and minorities could not influence politics, especially after the 1965 Voting Rights Act restored voting rights to black Americans and people of color. That rhetoric that tied racism and taxes elected Ronald Reagan to the White House in 1980, and it has since metastasized until the top 7 donors to the 2024 political cycle together gave almost $1 billion to Republicans, with Elon Musk alone contributing more than $291 million. The list, compiled by Open Secrets, shows that Democratic donors don't kick in until number 8 on the list, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who gave slightly more than $64 million to Democrats. George Soros, the Republicans' supervillain, didn't make the top 25. As those wealthy donors wish, the Trump administration is shredding the post-World War II government and has prioritized tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations. Trump's government is also firing women, black and brown Americans, and gender minorities from public positions and working to erase them from our history. MAGA Republicans have fired up their base against immigrants they claim are invading the United States. An exaggerated vision in which White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, for example, claims that we were invaded and occupied, entire neighborhoods were conquered, entire towns were subjugated, our treasury was, as he put it, in the plundered. That wildly exaggerated vision has enabled Republicans to justify throwing overboard the due process on which American rights are based. On Friday, Representative Victoria Spartz, a Republican of Indiana, told booing constituents, "You violated the rules. You are not entitled to due process." In fact, in the United States, the due process of law is what establishes whether someone has violated the rules, otherwise known as the law. Just how profoundly the administration is violating civil rights came through today when news broke of an Alien Enemies Act validation guide obtained by the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU. The guide lays out a point system by which officials from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, can determine if an immigrant is eligible for rendition to the Terrorism Confinement Center, or CCOT, in El Salvador. The guide tags people as members of the Venezuelan Tren de Aragua, or TDA, gang if they reach 8 points on a point system in which officers determine what seems to them a gang tattoo or a gang sign, or interact with those ICE says are gang members. Aaron Reichlin-Melnick of the American Immigration Council notes that nearly all of the criteria on the list are subjective, which helps to explain why so many people who are apparently unaffiliated with TDA were swept up in the rendition. With this checklist, Reichlin-Melnick writes, ICE can declare any Venezuelan an alien enemy without any concrete evidence, based solely on an ICE officer's interpretation of tattoos and hand signs, which may be completely innocent, or the bad luck of having a roommate ICE thinks is TDA. The MAGA Republicans' worldview is the same as that of the Confederates who preceded them. Some people are better than others and have the right to rule. It is no coincidence that Trump recently called for the restoration of Confederate statues. But if that worldview is correct, then getting rid of President Joe Biden's inclusive economy and hiring practices and putting white men in charge of everything should mean exactly what Trump is promising, a golden age of America. Instead, the strong economy the Biden administration created is tumbling, and Trump administration officials seem to have no plan to stop it except to trust in Trump. The officers in charge of keeping the nation safe have instead broken the law in an epic fail, demonstrating that they have no foreign policy plan except military strikes highlighted with emojis. They appear to disdain national security procedures. And the Signal scandal appears to have been just the tip of the iceberg. Tonight, Alexander Ward, Josh Dawsey, and Meredith McGraw of the Wall Street Journal reported that 2 U.S. officials told them that National Security Advisor Mike Waltz has created and hosted multiple other sensitive national security conversations on Signal with cabinet members. When the former Confederates called for cutting black men out of the vote in the 1870s by insisting their votes would usher in socialism, Americans didn't know whether a government elected by a wider range of Americans than in the past would thrive. In 2025, we have experienced not only 80 years of a government that created a strong economy and a stable world as it worked for all Americans. We have also experienced the 4 years recently passed in which the Biden administration demonstrated that such a government worked. It left us with a booming economy and strong national security that the Trump regime is now mangling. Nonetheless, Trump is digging into the position that some people are better than others and have the right to rule. Today, he told NBC News that he is considering a third presidential term, although that is explicitly unconstitutional. I'm not joking, he said. There are methods which you could do it.
Letters from an American was written and read by Heather Cox Richardson. It was produced at Soundscape Productions, Dedham, Massachusetts. Recorded with music composed by Michael Moss.